Well, this is what we were hoping for, but he is absolutely beasting me, this fish. He keeps wanting to go down this right-hand side, trying to take me around the reeds. Looks to be a good fish too. Thankfully, the rod and reel that I'm using at the moment is a lovely bit of kit to be fishing with, and it's absolutely taking it in its stride. Yes, go on. Flipping out, that was some battle. You won't believe that, I've literally just got that fish in the net, and as we were having a little discussion of what to do next, my one remaining rod on the spot has gone. Two carp in probably 10 minutes. Happy days. There you go, that is probably the definition of a cricketback common. Properly spawned out, but he's a cool little guy nonetheless. I've got a much bigger one in the sling, so we're going to get a couple of shots of him, slip him back, and yeah, get that bigger one out. Well, how about that for an absolutely cracking common? Bit of ghost carp in him. He weighs a little over 31 pounds, and he properly beasted me around this little bay, and it certainly put that rod and reel to the test. So we'll get him slipped back and run through a little bit more about that tackle. So the rods and reels that I've been using on this session are Shimano's TX-7a. They're the most updated TX7 rods, and I've paired them there with the new Power Aero reels. And I've been using this combination since probably early springtime, and it's safe to say that I've been nothing but massively impressed with both the rod and the reel in terms of their performance and also looks. They really are a stunning piece of kit. Now, the keen-eyed amongst you may have noticed that the spools that I'm using currently in this session have silver detailing around them, and that's because they're actually my personal spools from some other Shimano reels that I've got, which are loaded with much heavier line. I'm actually fishing in quite a sort of hit and hold situation up against some pads in a bay at the moment, and the line that's currently loaded onto these is sort of more of a distance line, so I just wanted something that's a bit beefier. And whilst buying these new, you do get given a set of spare spools. The ones that we've been supplied are simply loaded with that more sort of distance casting line. So let's get into the details on both the rods and reels now. Starting with the rods, as I mentioned, these are the TX-7As, they're the updated versions of the TX-7s. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the actual tech spec of the sort of the construction of the rod, but actually my experience of using them and how the sort of technology that Shimano have used translates into an actual fishing situation. So to start off with, the blank itself, these are the intensity model. It's a 12-foot intensity model, and it's a really good casting rod. I've been fishing on multiple occasions out at sort of 100, 120 yards, and at those sorts of distances, it really is a breeze fishing with this setup, and it is actually designed for fishing at much larger distances as well, with the 12-foot intensity and the 13-foot intensity really being capable of fishing up to and over 200 yards in the right hands. So the TX-7s really are designed as a sort of more of a distance tool compared to some of the other rods in the range. They've got a lot more power in the butt section, and you can really feel that when you're sort of going in for a cast and also when you're playing fish, to be fair. That power sort of goes about 2/3 up the rod, and that gives you a really sort of long lever. When you're going into a big cast, it means you can generate a lot of tip speed and a lot of speed in the lead. The original TX-7s were actually a world record casting rod, achieving some really phenomenal sorts of distances. And it's safe to say that the new TX-7As really do live up to that heritage and just bring a little bit more refinement into the rod. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot of power sort of 2/3 of the way up the rod, and whilst it does translate into a fish playing situation as well, you actually have got a really soft tip on there as well. So you don't have a really pokey rod. It's a powerful rod, but that soft tip means it's still really nice for playing fish on. Now, as I mentioned, these are the intensity models, so they're actually going to be the stiffest, most powerful rods in the range, but they do have other rods in the range at lower test curves. So if you're not having to fish at really long ranges, but you really like the rod, then you can choose a lower test curve, and that will give you more of a balance between casting and fish playing. In terms of the sort of the cosmetic appearance of the rod, it really is a stunning rod too. You've got this beautiful helical carbon wrap, which really does look nice. And then you've got almost sort of a shimmering effect on more of a sort of raw carbon on the tip section. The detailing is kept really minimal as well. You've just got a little gloss section here which has the TX-7 decals, and you'll notice as well there's a little line clip there as well, which is a nice little edge. In terms of the actual guides used on the rod, much like other rods in the Shimano range, they've actually gone for high quality ceramic guides on here. Now, I do actually really like this. It's an old school sort of design with a lot of modern rods opting for the more minimalistic style guides without the ceramic inserts. But I actually think that having the ceramic insert creates a much more smoother feeling rod. And actually when you go to cast with these rods or you're playing fishing, you really do get a sense of smoothness. The line simply flies through those rings without any issues, and you don't get any sort of grating sensation, whether you're using braid or mono. It's also worth mentioning that on the last few eyes on the tip section, they've opted for a single leg pattern, which just keeps the tip a little bit lighter, so it's a nicely balanced rod too. Then moving down onto the handle, you've actually got quite an old school looking handle for the most part at least. You've got a really lovely slim and firm EVA handle, an EVA flare up above the reel seat, and the reel seat that they've used is a slim Fuji DPS reel seat, really high quality piece of kit there. Now I say it's an old school looking handle in the most part because further down the handle you've got this sort of shaped flared section at the very butt of the rod with a little Shimano tribal butt cap on the end. Now this gives it a little bit of a futuristic tweak onto the handle, but actually in terms of functionality, it means that you get a really, really good grip around the base of the rod. Sometimes if you've got a really thin rod, it's a bit sort of small in your hand. This flared section at the bottom is just big enough to sort of get your grip around, and when you're pulling down into that big cast, it gives you something to really lever against. So I think that's everything really to say on the actual rod itself. Let's move on to the Power Aero reel. So this is Shimano's latest iteration of their Power Aero reel. It's the Shimano Power Aero 14,000 XTC. And I think it may just be my favourite reel that I've ever actually used. It's an expensive reel, yes, it's highly refined in how it feels, but it really is a powerhouse of a reel, as the name Power Aero suggests. So firstly, I'll just mention where it actually sits in the Shimano lineup. Now, Technium is their highest level brand, that's the most premium product, and the Power Aero sits just underneath that, above the Ultegra reels. Now, I've used the Ultegra CI4s a lot in my own fishing. I absolutely love them, and as I mentioned, that's the reason why you'd see the silver rim on some of the fish playing footage, because it's the same size spool. Now, the actual spool is really wide diameter, which basically means that the line comes off in a really nice coil and gets funneled down towards the butt ring. And in combination with the super slow oscillation 5 oscillation, you get a really lovely line lay, which is almost parallel. Now, the difference between this and the Technium is that Technium's got the super slow 10 oscillation, which is twice as many oscillations round. But personally, I think that the super slow oscillation 5 is absolutely perfect, and there's not really any need to go any higher than that. Shimano are particularly renowned for their gearing. They make brilliant reels. They also do a lot with bike gearing, and it's safe to say that the Hagani cold forged gearing that's used in the Power Aeros results in a really, really strong and powerful reel. And in combination with some other technologies such as silent drive and infinity drive, this basically transpires to an extremely smooth reel even under high levels of tension. So whether you're pumping in a big lead from range covered in weed, or whether you're really trying to sort of grind down on a fish if it's trying to make for a snag and you're trying to pump it away, that winding motion on the reel feels almost effortless, and you can really, really apply some pressure with these reels. The other thing that means is that these will last the test of time. I can personally say that with my Ultegra CI4s, they feel pretty much as good now, 6 years on, as they did on the first day I used them, and there's only more and more higher quality technology used in the Power Aeros. In terms of the actual body, this really compact and sleek little body utilises a combination of Hagani cold forged metal and also CI4, which is a carbon infused resin that's really, really strong but extremely lightweight, which actually means that despite being such a powerhouse, the Power Aero is actually one of the lightest reels that Shimano produces. As well as being extremely lightweight, the materials are really strong, and importantly as well, they're very stiff and rigid. Now, this basically means that you don't get any flexion or torsion in the reel as you're cranking down, or maybe if you're going into a really big cast, which really translates all of that power into the winding, or in the case of casting, keeps the reel nicely aligned with the butt ring to ensure that you don't get any mishaps. So if I turn the rod and reel round so you can actually see the front, you've got Shimano's cross carbon high speed drag, and I think the actual amount of variability in this drag is just about perfect. You can go from pretty much locked up there, you've got a little bit of play with about a quarter to half a turn, that's to more of a free spool. But yeah, in that quarter turn, you've got several levels of adjustment to increase or decrease the amount of tension on your line. So you can really lock it up nice and tight for a big cast. You can move from free spool to tight sort of fighting drag in only sort of half a turn, and then you've got all of that adjustment in between when you're playing fish. And the cross carbon drag means that it's a really silky smooth drag, so you don't risk any sort of hook pulls when you're playing fish at close quarters. So now if I just turn the reel so that you can actually see the handle, it's a really nicely refined but very solid handle. It's very solid on the reel, meaning that when you're actually winding, again, you're not losing any sort of pressure in the winding process. And then on the end, you've got Shimano's traditional rubberized handle knob, which gives you a really nice, comfortable grip. Now, the one thing that I will say is that these actually are wind-on, wind-off handles. So rather than just click folding or having to tighten the little knob on the side, all that you do with these is you wind them backwards, wind them all the way around, and then you can pop them into position like that when you're packing them away. Then simply wind it back until it's nice and tight. Really cinch that down tight so there's no movement and play in that handle. A couple of final features worth pointing out is that you've got a really refined one-piece bail arm here, and then you've also got a floating rotor line guard underneath, which stops your line from getting caught behind your spool. So overall, I really do think these are a fantastic reel. They're a premium reel with a hefty price tag with an RRP of around £420. But yeah, if you're looking for a really refined, beautiful feeling reel, it's nice and compact but has loads and loads of power, then it's well worth taking a closer look at this. Well, there you go. What better way to finish this video than with a lovely, lovely looking mirror. £26.5, properly tested the Power Aero and TX-7 rods once again, but we got him in the net eventually, and yeah, proper buzzing with him. So let's get this one slipped back, and if you want any more information on that rod and reel combination, then check out the Shimano website, fish.shimano.com.